Hey everybody, welcome back to watchNcarry. We have another customer mod for you today. This is going on a pretty popular one to the channel, the Casio GShock King. Specifically there on the back you can see this is the GX 56BB. So this one from the factory comes with this negative display, and the customer would like a colored filter added to it. We're going to be using this green one on the right. And so when you add a green filter, we have to first convert to a positive. And then what we'll do at the end is do a little cleanup here. There's some smudges here on the glass and on the case back, so we'll get that cleaned up for the customer. So make sure you have a nice flat surface to be working on. We have a raised bezel here, so I don't have to worry about that glass touching. If you don't have that particular design on your watch, like if you're modding one of the World Time Casios, you can just put some painter's tape right over that to protect the mineral glass. And we'll flip this to the side, and we need to remove a few screws here because we have this black shroud that's covering where the straps attach. So we want to get those straps off to give ourselves a little bit more room to work here. So 3 screws on this side. And then we're going to have the same on the other. Okay, then we will just pop off one side, and then the other should come off as well. Sometimes you'll have spring bars if you have a similar G-Shock in there, in which case you probably don't need to remove the 2 screws on either side of the lug. You'll probably just go straight for that case for that spring bar, but in this case, that's not the situation. Okay, we have 4 screws here that attach the rear part of the shroud. And the shroud is just that black piece of resin or plastic, I'm not sure exactly, that is surrounding the case on the inside of the watch. Okay, that looks great. Let's gently lift up on this part of the shroud here. So there's the back of it. And then we now have access to the inside of the watch. So with the case back, you want to gently kind of peek as you're lifting up on this, because what will sometimes happen, as it is here, and let me get this in focus really quick, is part of that O-ring, because it's lubricated, is sticking to the case on the right, and part of it is sticking to the case back on the left. So you want to separate that O-ring before lifting up completely. Okay, just like that. What will happen is if you lift up too fast, and let's say that O-ring is really stuck on there, especially if this is an older watch, you will gently stretch that O-ring, and then it will no longer fit into this this little round area, this little round trough here on the watch. And it's pretty hard to get these to shrink back the size. You probably would have to either let it sit for a while or just replace the O-ring. So O-ring looks pretty nice and lubricated there. We got a nice shine to it, but I'm going to clean that up and then re-lubricate that before reinstalling it. And then there's our case back. That's your speaker, by the way, in white. And you'll see here that as I'm disassembling this watch, I'm kind of laying out all my parts from left to right over here, so that way it's a little bit easier for you guys to follow along when it comes time to reassemble. And forgive me here, I'm just playing with, let's put this one at an angle because it's causing a glare on the camera. There we go. Okay, now we have this part here that you're going to want to remove. Okay, and we'll set that down. One more part here. And then now we actually have the module over here. So you're going to lift up on this. You can probably go from either the 12 o'clock or the 6. Just take maybe like the fork end type of spring bar tool and gently lift up on that module to remove it. Set it to the side, and then I'm immediately going to take my case back. Okay, going to use this little air duster away from my work area to kind of blow away as many dust particles as possible. Set this down and just prevent more dust from entering there, because it makes the reassembly a little bit easier to do when you do it that way. Okay, so at this point, this is kind of how your parts should look left to right. Okay, now we're going to disassemble the module even further. So again, this is soft silicone that I'm working on, but I just like to add a little bit extra protection here with a microfiber cloth. So a couple of things here. We have these 2 springs. Let's refocus here. Make it a little bit easier for you guys. Okay, contrast looks good on blue, I think. Hopefully it's good for the camera. Okay, so you have a couple of gold springs here. So just note that when we separate this module apart, it essentially breaks in half. Those springs are going to drop, and that's completely normal. So we need to get this display out because we need to remove the top layer of it and replace it to make it into a positive display. So to get to that display, you have these little clips here on the side in silver. So you're going to have the module facing you. You're going to, again, take a fork style spring bar tool and just go to those clips, insert your tool, and lightly twist to separate them. Okay, so you can kind of see how I've kind of separated that. See, that's separated versus this one, which is attached. So you're just going to put your tool in there, lightly twist, and separate it out. And then just work your way around the whole module. And as we do this, the display will maybe flicker a little bit and then eventually disappear because you are separating the battery. There we go. Okay, again, have the module facing this way. Okay, we have another spring that came out, which is different than these two. That's completely fine. This is a shorter one. There's our 2 other springs, and there should be another one here. There it is. So in every case, these 2 big springs are definitely going to fall out when you separate this out. You may or may not have these 2 small ones that fall out. It doesn't really matter how it happens for you. It's completely fine to reassemble. If I were you, actually, if the 2 small springs haven't fallen out on their own, I would probably get them out because they are so easy to lose when you are working and very hard to find. So the last thing you want is to have a lost spring. So this is our display here, okay? And the rest of this can actually stay together. So this half over here can stay together, all right? And we can set that to the side. There are no other springs that you really have to worry about falling out here when we flip this over. Yeah, nothing to worry about there, so don't worry about losing a spring. Let me show you. I'll open it up. So nothing really to worry about there. Okay, we'll set that to the side, and then we'll take our springs. Now, if you're using tweezers, you want to really grab these gently, especially the tiny ones, because if you grab them too tightly, what will happen is your tweezer head might slip, and then it'll fire that spring across the room. And again, these are very hard to find and also quite expensive to buy because you have to, I think, buy in bulk from a place like Pack Parts. I don't think they'll sell you just one. And then you got to pay for shipping on top of that. So, okay, so put our spring somewhere safe. We have our display in this orientation. Now we need to pop it out from the rear. So you're going to flip over and then take something plastic and thin. So trusty guitar pick for me. I'm going to go to the right side here and just insert my pick. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to just gently lift up here on the side, and this part should come off. Okay, this part can be a little bit hard to find landmarks, unlike the other parts that we removed. So just note that this part is blank here, and the part that was facing the inside, you can see, has numbers on that side. All right, so the number side is going to be going down. If you get lost, just rewind the video to this part and you can find out. Okay, then we have another part here to remove. And sometimes this comes off in 2 pieces. So again, this can be a little bit tricky to find landmarks, but just remember the white, or I guess it's more of a whitish green, is facing the inside and the checkerboard is facing you. These 2 contact points, by the way, on the bottom are where those 2 springs came out of. So sometimes you can look here on the side and it's actually a second layer that's hidden. This one is transparent. You can see the contrast there. So it has its own orientation also, but it really only goes one way because it's not symmetrical up and down. Okay, so we will set these 2 parts off to the side as well. Okay, and now we just have the back of our display, which is what we want. So to pop this guy out, you can just turn it over and lightly push on that side, and it should come off. And as for this part, the bottom hole represents the bottom of the display, or the 6 o'clock position. I know this is a digital watch, but just for reference, that would be the bottom, the 6 o'clock on your watch. Okay, now with this part, there's also 2 last pieces that you need to remove. Very important. The display will not work without them. Now these sometimes come off on their own, just like the springs, or they stay in place like this. They have a light adhesive over there on it. So I just like to remove them because it makes it easier when I'm reassembling. And these are the same exact length, so it doesn't matter if you mix up this to this side or this side to this side. It really doesn't matter. But be careful not to lose those. Okay, so now we have our display. Let's zoom out one more time to look at all of our parts. Sorry for all the zooming in and zooming out. Okay, so everything from the strap down to those two little white pieces on the far right. Okay, so that's how everything looks. Now, what's happening here is, for simplicity's sake, I like to think of this part as being made up of three different layers. Okay, so right now you're kind of looking at it like this. So I'm going to use these three fingers to represent the three layers on this side. So you're kind of looking at it like this, right? Now, if we turn our display to the side, it may not be really visible to you at home, but there are actually three different layers that make up this part here. And the part that's facing you is called the polarizing film. Okay. Now, polarizing film is pretty much the same. So when you buy a Casio watch that has this black display, this is called a negative display. It's only that way because the factory has oriented the polarizing film in a certain orientation. If the factory, when they were assembling this watch, were to orient the polarizing film in a different orientation, you would get a positive display, which is where you have, the white background with the black numerals, the opposite of what you have over here. So what we're doing in this particular mod is we're taking off this top layer here. We're going to use a blade or our guitar pick to get it started here, to just lift up an edge on that polarizing film, run our guitar pick the rest of the way through, remove this polarizing film, replace it with a new one, or remove it, clean up the glue that's underneath here, then replace it with a new polarizing film, but then orienting that film 90 degrees to the left or to the right, which is going to be giving us our positive display. Now, if you are working with a Casio King that has a positive and you're trying to make it look negative, you're going to follow this exact same procedure. Again, removing it, orienting it 90 degrees to the left or right with the new film, and you're going to get the opposite of what you started with. So because it can be quite hard to find that layer, like how do I find where to put my pick? Because all three layers look really, smushed together. We're going to drag our guitar pick on the top and we're going to listen and feel for it to jump down to the next layer. So let me show you what that looks like and what it sounds like. So that little click is the guitar pick being dragged and then jumping down to the next layer. Okay. Now, the glue is very, very sticky, so we want to use a little bit of an adhesive loosener to get the guitar pick started. So I'm going to switch to a microfiber cloth here because it will soak up any moisture and prevent it from going into our work area. And then for the glue loosener, I'm just using this little bowl of Goo Gone over here. Okay, you can also use Goof Off, same exact thing. You'll put a little bit of it, very small amount into a bowl. And then you'll take a Q-tip here, really kind of saturate it in. And then to get started, turn your display to either side and just coat the whole perimeter of this thing. Okay, and so what we're doing there is you're putting a little bit of glue on the edge. Yeah, glue will go everywhere, but you don't have to worry about the other layers separating because we're not going to be forcing a tool into them. But when we put our guitar pick into here, it will help to have that little bit of Goo Gone pre-loosening this little edge, so that way the guitar pick can really grab into it. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and I'm going to let this sit for about 5 minutes. The longer you wait, the more the adhesive loosener gets to work on the glue. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. Let's take our pick. We're going to wet one edge of it with a little more Goo Gone, and then take your pick, drag it to any edge, it really doesn't matter. Listen for that click, and then try to get an edge started on removing it. So in this case, I got really lucky. That really got in there pretty quick. You can see how my pick is already separating that polarizing film off. In many cases on the same exact, well, different watch, but same exact model, I've had trouble getting the pick started on any edge. So in that case, what you'll have to do is move to something a little bit more thinner and firmer, like a blade. Obviously, you want to use a new blade, not an old one like this. A sharpest knife is the safest knife. You don't have to dip the blade in Goo Gone, but what you'll do is you'll curl your fingers like this to hold the display, and then do the same procedure that you did with the guitar pick, and try to get that edge started with the blade. The purpose of curling your fingers is so that if the blade slips, at least it's hitting your nails and not your fingers. Now, regardless of which way you use to get the little edge started, okay, whether it's by blade or whether it's by pick, you want to finish it off with the pick. You don't want to finish it off with the blade. Yes, it's possible to do it either way. Again, it's just a safety thing, and it's also just less risk of damaging the other layers that are below what we're trying to remove. So I'm going to stick with my pick. Again, I'm going to saturate the tip of that and go to that edge that I just got started, and we will remove the rest of this. So I'm working basically on the same plane and just rocking this pick back and forth. And it should come off nicely in one piece like so. All right, so there is your polarizing film. So back to what I was saying, from the factory, again, how this watch was assembled. In this case, they chose to orient the polarizing film, which is what I'm holding on my left hand here, this way. Now, if that factory had oriented it 90 degrees to the left, you'll see that we get a positive display. And if I reassembled this watch with, a cleaned up polarizing film in this orientation, we would have what we're trying to get, the white background with the black numerals. If I turn it 90 degrees back, we get black. Let's go the opposite direction. We get positive again. And let's go a full 360, or I guess a full 180, and we're going to get negative again. So all that matters in making the positive or negative display is the orientation of this film. Now, it does matter which side of the film you're on, and it's going to be more evident when I get the new film out. Right now, it's kind of too dirty to notice, but you'll notice that on this opposite side, I'm getting more of these like purples. And later on, you see greens. So that's how you know you're on the wrong side to get negative or positive conversions. You can certainly reassemble the watch this way, and it'll kind of give you like a kind of trippy gradient look if you want, but that's not what the customer's looking for. So you just want to make sure that you are on the right side where you're only getting pure blacks and pure whites. That's the right side to be on for your new polarizing film. Now this can get tossed because we can't reuse this. There's just simply way too much glue on this. You could clean up that glue, but then you would end up scratching it by all the wiping you have to do. And anyways, when we reorient this and put this down, you'll see that in this orientation, the film does not fully cover the display, so it can't be reused. If you're working with, a square display or a square polarizing film or round, you could probably do it, but again, you'll probably scratch that film because it's pretty fragile with all the rubbing you have to do to get the glue off. So we're going to toss this. And now we're left with our other layers here, but a lot of glue. You can see the little clumps here. So go back to your Q-tip, really soak it in Goo Gone, and we're not going to rub right now. We're just basically dabbing a whole bunch of it on. Cover the entire display. And then let this sit for, again, about 5 minutes. That'll just loosen things up. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes here. We're going to take a little bit more Goo Gone, and now we're going to move in circles. I'm holding this Q-tip at like a 45-degree angle, and I'm using firm, but I'm not pressing this Q-tip really hard. Beneath all of this cotton is going to be that really hard stock that's holding it, so you don't want to scratch or damage any of the parts that you're working with. So just do this on all sides, and then once you feel like you've got enough clumps of glue, you can take your cloth that you're working with, again, microfiber is best, and just kind of wipe in one direction to get that glue off. Oh, this is a really easy one to work with. So the reason I know that is because I'm already hearing that squeaky sound. So what you're going to do is keep repeating this step. More Goo Gone. You don't have to wait another 5 minutes after the initial one. Just put it everywhere and then rub. But you want to keep doing what I just did until your Q-tip and your towel is making a squeaky sound, because that tells you you're kind of getting down to the bare glass, so to speak. And so that kind of tells you that if you're hitting glass, you've kind of cleaned off the glue already, because the glue is what's preventing that squeaky sound from happening. And then again, wipe off. Wow, this has to be the easiest glue removal I've had on a King, and I think I've done like a dozen of these by now, so this one is really easy to work with. All right, shift our towel around here. Get a clean side, and let me see if I can show you. This is not going to be fully cleaned yet, but have a good form of direct light above, because it really helps, and then turn this display in the light, and that will help to highlight any areas of glue that still might exist. So let me see if I can point one out to you that I see right now. Oh, I can see it here in person, but it's not showing up on camera. Let me see. Bear with me 1 second here. So a lot of the glue is off. Okay, there. See right there? That's a little bit of glue. You really want to get that off, because that's going to be visible when you reassemble the watch. And the glue also likes to hide out here on the edges, because it's harder to kind of get full contact. Most of our pressure is going towards the center. So repeat all these steps, and then when you feel like you've got it clean and you're hearing that squeaky sound, kind of like that, you can dry it off and take a look under the light to make sure that you've got it all. And I guess I'm not really wiping the one side. I'm kind of wiping from the inside out to just kind of get the glue off. Okay, make sure your display is on a flat area. You don't want to be holding it like this and then pushing, holding it above the air while pushing on this, because you're going to end up bending it. So really make sure you've got that back support. Flip our towel again. And let's take one more look. And this looks great. Completely clean. Very good. All right, here on the top and here on the bottom, you are going to have these little strips of glue that were holding this white part that we removed earlier. So it's going to be right. Let's orient this so you get some orientation. So with it oriented this way, it's a strip of glue tape here and a strip of glue tape here on the bottom. Okay, you can go ahead and just remove that. There's really no need for that. Those two little white parts will hold on their own when everything is reassembled. And it looks like the bottom one was already removed when I was rubbing things off. So give this one more wipe down. Okay, wipe the edges. And then wipe the back. And at this point, I'm not touching the front of the display with my fingers. I'm just holding it by the edge. If you want to make it it's a little bit harder for dexterity to be doing this with gloves. I know there are going to be some people that just get outraged that I'm not wearing gloves, and I get it. I just want to tell those people that the people's watches that I work on, they fully know what I'm doing. In fact, the two people, because I'm going to be doing this mod again right after this video, they saw me do a video without gloves and they requested me to do their watch. So they're fully aware of how I'm working on it. I'm not saying that's the best way. I'm just saying that it's been fine for my customers so far. and that they are aware of how I'm treating their watch. So if you would rather wear gloves, like that's your preference, I totally get that and respect that. Go ahead and wear gloves. It does make it a little bit trickier for dexterity, but it certainly is possible. You can also get, if you don't want full gloves because it can get quite sweaty, you can just get those finger-tipped gloves. Those will also help a little bit. Okay, so now we've got this display fully clean. Set this to the side, and let's go ahead and wash our hands because that Goo Gone tends to stick. Okay, hands are nice and clean. So that was our display. Let's move to the polarizing film part. So for polarizing film, this is what it is. It usually comes in a big sheet. So this was about the size of like a piece of binder paper. And you can order this from Amazon. I'm going to put a link below to where I ordered it. Depending on when you watch this video, that link may or may not be functional. If it's not, then go ahead and just search for something similar. You want to look for linear polarizing film. The size I got is called size A4, and this is non-adhesive. When you buy polarizing film, it's usually going to be made of 3 layers, so it's hard to see here, but there's actually 3 layers here. There's a protective coating on the back. You can kind of see it wrinkling there, or on the front, I should say. Another protective coating on the back, and then the actual polarizing film in the center. Now, if you buy adhesive, what's going to basically mean is it's going to be like a sticker. One side will be sticky. This one, when you peel off both protective layers, it's not sticky on either side. I prefer this method because if you get an air bubble with the adhesive version, it's virtually impossible to get that air bubble out, especially if it's in the center. You basically have to remove that whole film again. There might be some sticky residue from the film left on the display. You've got to clean that again with Goo Gone and then put on a new filter. And if there's another air bubble, you have to repeat that whole process again. You can get the same exact effect by just using polarizing film. I'm going to be cutting this by using non-adhesive film. I'm going to cut this a little bit larger than my display. And then the extra parts that are beyond what the display is, I'm going to use some double-sided tape and glue it to the inside case of the watch. So that way it's still sticking. It's not floating around in the watch when the customer wears it. It will be stuck in place. But rather than sticking it to the display, I'm sticking it to the inside of the case. Okay, so when working with polarizing film, you first have to make sure that we don't have any wrinkles or scratches on it because that will affect when things get reassembled. So I have a bunch of little wrinkles here, but that's from the protective layer on the back. That's not from the actual damage to the film. So this film looks good. Now you want to make sure you're on the right side, as I mentioned before. If we flip this over, you get 2 different effects. If I flip it to this side, you want to look for pure black or pure white so when you rotate. So when I rotate this, I'm getting that gradient look. See, it's like white and then purple and then green. So that's the wrong side. Flip it over. Let's do that again. There's our white and there's our black. There's our white and there's our black. Okay, so if your display was like this, which is what we're going to cut this a little bit larger, but in this orientation. Okay, you want to get it at, you want to cut the film out at its whitest white or at its darkest dark if you're going to be making this into a negative. So I'm going to orient it this way. It just happens to be 90 degrees. Okay, and then remove this and then take my case back here, open that up, and then I want to cut the film to the size of this. So basically this internal size, because that's where we're going to be sticking it to, is here on the top and here on the bottom. Now you'll notice that there are 2 little cutouts here, or indentations, little circles, 1 and 2. You want to leave those open. You don't want your film to cover those because that needs to make contact with the large gold springs that we removed earlier. Otherwise the watch won't work properly. So our film will basically be this size and then come up a little bit above those 2 dots like that. Okay, so again, you want to make sure you're on the right side to be working on. Okay, so I know it's this side, but it's going to be inverted when it's installed. So I'm going to turn this upside down. Okay, I'm going to take a fine tip Sharpie and let's actually go here on this side and just kind of trace out roughly what we need. Okay, so kind of like that. Now you'll notice I'm writing on the polarizing film, well, on the back of it, but don't worry that I'm writing on it. Again, remember we have a protective layer on this side and on the front. So when we peel those protective layers off, the Sharpie mark will disappear, and it does not bleed through when you buy these triple layered films. And I'm going to write just a letter B here, because the B will tell me that this is the back of the film, which means it needs to be facing me, all right? Because if I don't do that, I might install it this way, and then that will be incorrect. We'll be on the wrong side. So we'll just leave it like that. And then put our case back on. Again, we want to limit dust going into there. Take this part and take a pair of scissors and just cut it out. Again, I know I'm touching this one all over, but again, I'm just touching the protective layers, so no need to worry about fingerprints for now. Okay, let's resize this. Take our case again. And let's set this inside and make sure that we have good coverage here. All right, so just moving this around to see and looking at the light to see if it's fully covering all the corners. So just give me 1 sec. Okay, so in this case, I think I cut it a little bit short. It's definitely covering the whole entire area that I need to, but I really have to be very, very careful that when it gets reassembled that some of the corners might get exposed. So I could do with a larger one of this. So I'm going to save this because I have another watch with a smaller display that needs a conversion, and I can use that there. So let's take our film again. Again, check to make sure we're on the right side. There we go. And I'm going to do this off camera just because it's a little bit hard for me to see in the light in the current orientation. Okay, so we have another one here. Okay, this one is definitely much better full coverage. Good avoidance of those 2 circles at the bottom, but just a little bit too wide and too tall. So I got to trim a little bit here and trim a little bit here on the side. Okay, trim a little bit here on the top left corner. Okay, that looks perfect. So if you, it's kind of hard to see here, but you want to lay your film down as you would stick it, and then check that it's making full coverage. It's kind of avoiding these two circles at the bottom. You can see here that the cutout for the viewable area is within the polarizing film, so you want to make sure you have that. And you also want to make sure you have some thicker overlapping parts that go beyond the visible area up here, which is where we're going to be applying our glue. Otherwise, you won't have an area to put the glue tape on. So that part looks good. So that's our polarizing film done. We can carefully set this guy off to the side, and now we're going to do the same exact thing with our filter. Okay, so here is our green polarizing film. I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did with, this is our green filter. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with our polarizing film. There are some smudges on here that I still need to wipe off. But again, I'm just sizing this for now. I'm not worried about keeping it clean at the moment. Okay, and I'm going to do this again off camera just because it's easier for my line of sight. But basically, I'm going to trace the shape. Again, you want to avoid those two small circles at the bottom. Okay, I've drawn out my shape. Let's go ahead and cut this out. Again, I'm going to avoid touching the part of the filter that I'm going to use. And the filter is different than the polarizing film, so it doesn't matter which is the back or which is the front. It's all going to look the same. Okay, we have our film. Let's check the size. Gonna dust this a little bit, just because I can see some dust particles, and you want to limit transferring as much of that dust to the case as possible. Lay this inside and do the same thing. Just check for fitment. Okay, so quite a bit to cut off here. Yeah, definitely some off the top and off the right side. Okay, let's try it out again. Okay, still need to cut more off the top. And then bevel the top corners just a little bit more. Okay, top looks good now. Now I just need to, oh, do I need to cut more? Let me see. Yeah, let me bevel the top two corners just a tiny bit more. All right, so that looks pretty good. So again, it's harder to see the green than the polarizing film, but what you want to look for is that you've got good coverage, of course, of the cutout visible areas. You want those completely covered and overlapped a little bit, because when you turn the watch to the side, you can see any gaps if you don't have good coverage. And then the top, you want to make sure that you've got a thick part up here in the non-visible area that you can put your glue tape to again. And that looks pretty good. Now, the order of things, the way this goes is you are going to be putting with the back of the watch facing you as it is right now, you're going to be putting the colored filter down first. Then you're going to be putting the polarizing film down, again, in the correct orientation and the correct side. And then the rest of the assembled module that we took apart is going to go on top of that. And then you'll put your O-ring, your case back, and then the shroud. So that's the order of things, but you want to start with your filter first. So let's get the filter out of here, and we're going to clean this up. What you can do to clean this up is just take a very, very fine, like for your glasses, microfiber cloth, and just gently wipe off the filter. And if there's any visible dust, you can take just an air duster like this. I'll put a link for this below, and just dust it away from your work area. Okay, so to get started, we need to put a strip of glue tape here on the top. You can sometimes put it here on the bottom, but the top is definitely more than enough that you need, plus the compression from the module so it won't go anywhere. So the tape that I'm using here is called T-Rex, and this is double-sided tape. One layer of it, or one side of it, is going to be white. The other side is transparent. The minute you pull off the white part, it's sticky on both sides. And then what I usually do, I'll bring my camera here, is I take little strips of it. You can see here I mark glue on my chopping board, and then I'll take a blade and I will just cut little strips that I need and apply it to the inside of the case. I have a separate video on how to use the glue tape, and I will put that link in the description if you need more information there. So let's cut our little strip here off camera. And I like to lay down my tape with a blade here. This is just an old one, but it is cleaned. There's no dirt that I'm going to be transferring onto here. It just has marks from it being in contact with a flame from a different project. And then I'm just going to lay it definitely not in the visible area. You don't want to see the tape. This is the non-visible area, but I don't want to put it right on the edge of that. So not here. I want to move it just a little bit above the edge, because when you compress everything, the tape has a little bit of thickness and it tends to squeeze and expand just a little bit. So if you put it too close to that edge, it's going to expand into the visible area when you reassemble. So maybe just like a millimeter or two away from that edge. Just lay that down and lightly push that in place. Now in this case, the white protective layer of the double-sided tape already came off. If it didn't for you, you're just going to take a pair of tweezers and lightly remove that. Okay, so now that we're going to lay our filter, we want to get rid of any possible visible dust that's in here. The best way to check that is to have a direct light above you and have a black background. So you can see right there, we have a little speck. Okay, so we're going to flip this over and take our air blaster and just go from underneath, so that way gravity kind of pulls the dust down as we loosen it with the air. And again, I'm going to do this off camera. You don't want to touch the inside of that with your fingers, obviously, and you want to limit touching it with tools, especially metal, because it will easily scratch. It's mineral crystal. Let's check again. Probably should have cleaned the outside of this before I even opened the watch, because it makes checking for dust a little bit easier. Let's do this one more time. And check for dust. Now I see a little bit of dust here and smudges, but I can tell from my viewpoint that that's on the outside facing me, so I can clean it up later. I want to check for anything that's on the inside there. This is a toothpick, by the way. That's why I'm touching it to the glass. Sometimes the dust is hard to tell if it's inside or outside, so I'll just kind of push it with my toothpick to see if it moves. And that's all on the outside. Yeah, that's on the outside. Okay, so that looks good. So one more time there. Okay, let's flip this over. Again, that's the top of the watch. So 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Carefully take your filter with a pair of plastic tweezers. Dust it off your work area. Check against a black background. I'm going to do this off camera here, but you want to check against a black background to see if there's any visible dust. Okay, this one looks nice and clean. And then you're going to lay your filter on top and try to get it where you want it the first time, because that tape will grab it a little bit. So this one is almost there. I just laid it down gently, didn't push it. Let's take my toothpick again and carefully readjust this filter. Again, make sure our two holes here at the bottom are not covered at all. Make sure you've got good coverage of the visible area. Let me take a thinner tool here. Actually, maybe a blade might be better. And that looks great. So I've got good coverage. Once everything looks great, you want to gently push at the top where your glue is, because that will really help the filter to stick. Try not to move the filter. You just want to push directly down, and you'll notice that the glue darkens as we do that. That means that it's sticking to that filter. Again, check your coverage, make sure it's good, nothing is exposed. Okay, when we're pushing down on this glue, make sure it's not expanding into the visible area. If it does, just remove the filter and reapply the glue tape with a new strip, and that looks great. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing, but with our polarizing film. This guy over here. Take your display, bring it right next to it, and again, make sure that you have the right side. So you can see here where I wrote B. When I rotate this, it goes between black. Oh wait, is this correct? Or is it this way? Oops. Hold on, let me do this off camera again. I can barely see from behind the camera. Okay, so it needs to be like this. There we go. So just make sure that you rotate it and you have pure black and pure white. That tells you that you're on the right side. And then of course we're going to be in the orientation that fits and in the orientation that gives us the whitest white, right? And then because this is going to go into the case, it's going to be flipped over, right, on this side. So I'm going to leave that there. So that's ready to grab, and I know I'm grabbing the right side. And I'm going to apply another piece of glue tape directly on top of the green filter and in the same spot that I put it before, here on the top. So we'll cut again another strip here. There we go. Okay, just like that. And gently tap down. I guess we can use our other tool. Okay. That looks great. Let's set that tape in place. And then let's give this the same thing. We're going to turn this upside down and gently use our duster. We don't want to go too hard like before because that filter might fly off. Check against a black background for any dust that might be in there. Okay. Take our filter on this side. Okay, and again, this is going to be turned like this. Oops. Okay, it's going to be turned like that. So we're going to be removing the part that's facing us right now, the protective film. You can either take your nail or something thin. I'm going to do this off camera. Okay, I was able to lift up an edge on this with my blade. So there's that part coming off right there. Take my case. Okay, remove that layer. As I remove it, I'm going to grab from the sides only. And I don't want to touch the part that's being exposed. Take that film down and gently lay this down. Adjust it so it's sitting properly inside the case and on top of the go. And then once you feel that it's positioned correctly, you can tap down on the top to adhere it to the glue tape. Okay, that looks good. Gently push down. Okay, perfect. We still have our 2 exposed holes here at the bottom. And let's now remove the protective layer from the back. Or actually what we'll do is we'll leave that in there, the protective layer, because it's just another protection against dust. And then we'll cover this up momentarily and reassemble our module. So that way we're ready to go there. Okay, so for reassembling our module, let's take a few pieces here. So grab your display, make sure it's oriented in this way. Hopefully you can see that little rectangle there at the top. Let's go ahead and just dust off the top of it, check for any fingerprints that might be on there. So everything looks good. And then we're going to take this part next. Okay, you want that circle there at the bottom in the 6 o'clock, the big one. And then you want these little teeth facing you right now. So I'll put that there, take our display, make sure not to touch the front of it, turn it over, and lay it down. And then just lightly push that in. Okay, next we're going to take these 2 parts here. Okay, again, there are 2 parts. You have a clear part there on the right, and the green part. You want to make sure that the 2 shapes line up with each other, the clear and the green. And then you want the black part, the checkerboard part facing you, and the 2 dots there at the bottom. And then you're just going to lay this down behind. Gently tap it flat. Take this part here. Again, you want the numbers facing the checkerboard, and you want it in this orientation. You're going to lay that down. It's probably best to lay down the left side first and then let the right side fall down naturally, and then push on the right side while supporting the left, and you'll kind of hear it click into place. Okay, now we've got a tiny gap here at the top and here at the bottom, and that's where we're going to be adding these 2 pieces. Okay, you're going to grab it so that the thin side is facing you and put them in those 2 little slits. And just lightly push down, not too much pressure. Make sure they're nice and parallel. Okay, then you're going to take this part on the right, have it in this orientation with those 2 gray shapes facing you and these 2 gold dots here at the bottom. And you're going to carefully pick up your gold springs, the small ones, so that's the baby one, very gently. Okay, and I'm going to show you what these look like up close. So you'll notice that it's thinner here on one side and wider at the other side. Okay, you're going to insert those 2 springs into here and into here, these 2 white areas, and you want to put the wider side down on top of those 2 dots. Now what I found easiest to do is, rather than use tweezers, oddly enough, I don't know if it's static electricity or something, but I just take a blade here. Okay, make sure you touch it to something else that's metal away from your watch to make sure there's no charge there. But for some reason, it's probably just the grip on the little burrs maybe on the blade here. But what I like to do is just go to the thin side of my spring that I'm going to do and just lightly touch it there. And oftentimes it picks up the spring, and I have less of a chance of squeezing this too hard with the tweezers and letting the spring fly across the room, which has happened to me before on my own watch. So I just lightly pick it up. See how it just kind of grabs that? Okay, and then I'm just going to make sure that the wide part is facing down and just lightly lay that down like so. May not have been very visible from your angle, so we'll do it one more time here and gently rotate this after you lay down the spring because it's so easy for that spring to pop off. So here's our last spring here. Just gonna keep touching it till it kind of grabs my blade. There we go. I had it for a second. Well, there we go. Find the wide base of that spring and just lay it down gently. If you have another tool like a toothpick, you can maybe try to push it down if it's clinging to your blade, but be very gentle. There we go. And let me carefully show you what that looks like. So I don't have a macro lens here, but you can see that the springs are facing upward, and the parts that are facing upward is the narrow end of the spring. So gently set that down. That's probably one of the hardest parts of this mod, is laying down that spring. Okay, let's zoom out a bit here. Okay, so now what I need to do is take this part and flip it over onto this part. And these two, or I should have said, this contact and this contact is going to make contact with this spring and that spring. So how about this contact and this contact? Well, that's going to be now your big spring. So take your big spring. These are just a little bit longer, you can see. And again, I'm going to hold this one up so you can see that it is also thicker, barely though, on one side and a little bit more thin and solid on the other. So you want the thin, solid side to go down first. Okay, so I'm going to grab the spring by the thicker end gently. This one you can grab. And I'm going to put it into this hole right there. And just set it down. And then do the same for the other one. There you go. Now these springs are a little bit tall, so they're going to sit a little bit proud, a little bit higher than the other small springs. Now what you need to do is just leave the one on the right alone. You don't want to move that anymore. You're going to take this part, hold it in this orientation, flip it over, and while grasping the sides of it, because you don't want the circuit board to fall down. If it falls down, it's going to knock those springs out of where they are. You want to kind of grasp it from the sides like I am here. Okay, and then you want to line up one of the clips. So I'm going to line up the left clip here with this part here on the left, because that clip is where it's going to attach to. And that's going to keep my alignment. And then once I make contact with this part on my right hand, I'm just going to keep pushing down firmly. I'm never going to let go, because if you let go, those springs might fly back up because you're going to be compressing them as you're pushing down. Keep pushing down till you make contact with that left clip. Clip it into place and hold it with one finger while you secure the other clips around the perimeter. Okay, so slowly down. Good. Then push, secure the left, hold that, top left, top right, right clip, bottom right, bottom left. Okay, so really push those in. Okay, now before you flip this over, I'm not going to show you on camera because I don't want to turn this aside. You want to rotate this around and look from the side to make sure your clips are actually clipped in. Because if there's any sides that are not fully clipped in, then the two halves are not grabbing each other and the springs might fall out, especially those baby springs. Okay, so I've got good engagement there from both sides. I can now flip this over without any worries. There's our two larger springs still there at the top. Okay, and then your baby springs you won't be able to really see because they're there at the bottom. Okay, check your work area here to make sure that the baby springs did not fall out. So there we go. And those two big springs are going to go into those two holes that we left uncovered. Okay, now before we insert the module, I'm going to check our display for any fingerprints that you might have. Okay, I don't have any, but I'm still going to take a clean microfiber cloth here just in case and gently wipe the top. You don't want to use the same cloth that you used with the Goo Gone. Make this a brand new one. Okay, that looks great. Rotate the display in the light to check for any fingerprints or dust. It's a little bit of dust, so I'm going to go ahead and dust this off my work area. Okay, that looks great. Let's zoom out a bit here. Okay, now we have our last part here. We need to remove the protective layer of the back of the polarizing film. I actually did it earlier and I didn't realize that I had accidentally pressed pause on the camera when I meant to zoom in. So I put it back on for you so you can see how to do it. You just kind of take something thin and just go to one of the edges and just lightly lift off to protect the backing. And there's that part that I marked in Sharpie there. So that comes off. Check this for dust again and for position. Okay, everything looks good there. Oh, did it again. I'm sorry, I have a small screen here and the zoom button is right next to the stop button. So yeah, I think I'm recording. Okay, good. So we have our protective backing removed. Okay, we want to check this again against a black background for any dust. Just give it a very light dusting. Do one more time for your module. Okay, and then we're just going to invert this with the springs at the 6 o'clock position, upside down. Now, in some cases, these little stems that go to the buttons or the pushers will stay pushed in, and you have to pop them back out. These are spring-loaded, so I don't have to worry about that in this case. But you just kind of give these a light tap on the inside, those little stems, to make sure they're really pushed out. And then go ahead and lay down your module carefully. Okay, like so. Now it should glide into place, but sometimes what happens is these little metal tabs that are attached to the module, what happens is when you push the pusher or the button, it pushes in the stem here, and then the stem pushes against this little thin, let's get a better pointer, this little thin piece of metal here, and then it activates the module. So what happens is this little thin piece of metal, sometimes it rests like on top of the stem for the pusher, and you want it to be behind it so that way it pushes it. So put a little bit of pressure with one finger on the center of your module. Take something thin like your spring bar tool and just lightly go to each of those tabs and push them inward while applying a little bit of pressure, and then repeat for all of the pushers. And in most cases, the module you'll feel that it'll sink down even further, which means that it's seated properly. Okay, and then that looks great. And then you can just carefully push each pusher, and you can see how it's pushing properly on that metal tab and on that one. Excuse me. And that one. And on that one. So that looks good. Okay, next we need to perform an all clear, which is what you do when the battery is removed. We didn't really remove the battery in this case, but we did separate the module in parts, so technically the battery was away. So to do an all clear, you're going to go to the 6 o'clock position is here at the bottom. And you have this little negative sign here. Okay, and then you have this other part here. It says AC, which is this hole right here. So you're going to take a paper clip, you're going to kind of bend it into a U shape like that. Have one end a little bit longer than the other. The longer end is going to go into that AC hole, and then the opposite end is going to go to that negative sign. You can just kind of flex your paper clip and then just hold it there. I like to hold it for 10 seconds. Okay, and then if you did a proper all clear, the module should be reset to midnight. And we're gonna flip this over and just check our work before reattaching all the other parts. Oops. Okay, and there we go. Got a little bit of dust on the outside of this case and some smudges that I still need to clear up, but we have our lettering is all good. Our numbers are fully displayed. Okay, sometimes what will happen is if you don't connect those the parts of the module properly, you'll have some numbers that won't show up properly, like maybe the bottom of the 2 is missing there on the 12. But in this case, everything looks good. So after I check that all my numerals and letters look good, I want to check that my filter fully covers everything. So I'm going to rotate this in all directions, and I want to check the edges to make sure that I don't see any of that exposed gray white display underneath. Because if I see that, that tells me I didn't cut a green filter large enough to cover the area. And when the client turns their watch, they're going to be seeing those little edges there on the side, and they'll see that open part of the display. I don't want them to see that. I want them to see nothing but green in this case, because that's what the customer recommended. And of course, you're checking for dust and for finger smudges on the display, as well as on the inside of the glass that might have gone there. So this looks really great. So we can flip this back over. Again, that's the 6 o'clock there at the bottom. And you are in the home stretch here. So we are going to go to our gray piece next. You'll notice these little buttons here. Those should be facing you, and you're going to hold it like so. And you'll notice that these 2 contacts kind of pop out through the cutout in the gray. Those 2 contacts are important, by the way. Those are going to make contact with your speaker on the case back. But before we put that case back, we're going to put the white piece. Now with the white piece, you have a few landmarks here. Again, you have this like little half moon depression on one side, and on the other side you don't really have it. So that half moon depression should be facing you. And you're going to basically follow the same position as the gray piece below it. Just make sure, again, those 2 contacts are still popping through. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to move to our O-ring. So I'm going to move the module or the whole watch to the side. Take a microfiber cloth here. And take my O-ring. This O-ring looks pretty clean already, so nothing really for me to clean. It's already pretty well lubricated, but just to kind of show you how to do this, you'll take a clean Q-tip and you want to use 100% silicone oil. Because silicone oil will not eat away at rubber. So there it is. Don't worry about viscosity. In fact, just get the cheapest one. Okay, and it doesn't have to be this brand. You just want to look for silicone fluid there. You can buy this on Amazon. And I'm just going to dip the tip of my Q-tip into there And let's zoom in here. There we go. Sorry for the high yellow there, but it'll show the shine of the oil better. There you go. You can see the oil coming off the Q-tip. And I'm just going to roll this Q-tip all the way around, flip it over, and do the same on the other side. Now, in some of my older videos, I would take clean fingers, put a little bit of silicone oil in there, and then drag the Q-tip gently through my fingers to lubricate it. Please don't do that, because what ends up happening is you, again, are stretching it ever so slightly, the O-ring, and it's going to make it very difficult to fit back into its trough. So now we'll go back to our watch. Take your O-ring and... Okay, there's the trough. You can see all around the side. Lay your O-ring gently down in there and position it. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Take our case back. Again, this is the 6 o'clock position here at the bottom, so this is the way you should orient your case back. And then we will put this directly on like so. Now, keep some pressure with one finger after you attach the case back. This is really just specific to this model. On other models, you can go ahead and put in your screws already, but in this case, we can't really do that because we have the shroud that needs to go on top first. So I'm going to check the inside of the shroud, and the inside looks actually pretty clean. I don't really have to clean anything there. And I don't really see, there's scratches, but I don't really see any dirt or grime around this area that will be covered by the shroud. If I did see that, I would go ahead and clean that for the customer. I don't see that in this case. So I'm just going to keep pressure there, gently let off, put my shroud back on. There's no orientation to this. Okay, keep that in place. And then now you can put those 4 screws to secure the case back. And this is the shape of the screw you want to look for. Okay, the only other 2 types of screws you have are these types. These 2 here at the top. One is much shorter. See, it's shorter. So you don't want to use that one. And you definitely don't want to use the long one. So we're going to use these 4 here. All right, so I like to do 1 and then secure that down, but just loosely tighten it. You don't have to fully tighten it yet. Okay, and then the other side. There we go. So now that we have all 4 in, we can fully tighten. Okay, and before we attach the rest of the watch, I want to check my functions because now the case back is really on, right? If there was anything loose that would come undone, it would have been taken care of already because the case back is on. So now is the time to check all your functions. So I like to start with the bottom left first. And I go to the stopwatch. When I do the bottom left button, I'm looking to see if the mode is actually switching. I'm checking for feel, that I'm not feeling any clicking or catching, because that could mean that maybe that little metal tab is not making good contact with the stem. This feels great. And I'm listening for sound. The sound tells me that we're making good contact with the case back, which is where the speaker is. So now the bottom left button is done. We're going to go now to activate the stopwatch functions. I believe it's the bottom right. Push it again to stop. And clear, I think, is top left here. There we go. And then top right is your backlight. And let's get that in focus here. So that's what the backlight looks like with a green filter. I don't know what the backlight color was before I put the green filter on. Okay, but it's still nice and crisp. Okay, so everything looks good there. Now we can move to our strap. I'm going to check here inside the inside of the lug, see if there's any dirt there. It's just a little bit of dust, so I'm going to dust this away from my work area. Take the strap, do the same thing, check for any dirt or grime. So we've got a little bit of dirt right there on the top and a little bit here as well. I'm just going to take a damp cloth and just wipe that off. So my cloth here, it's a little bit damp. I'm putting a toothpick behind it to give it a more finer edge, and I'm just going to work and get that dirt off. Okay, well, I have the strap here, these little grooves here in the strap. Let's go ahead and wipe those off. Those are popular areas to catch more dirt. The rest of this looks good. Okay, and then just take away the toothpick and just give it a general wipe here. Move that keeper to one side, really get all areas of this clean. And then, of course, the buckle. And that looks good. Okay, home stretch here. So we're going to take our watch again, flip it over so it's in this orientation, turn it this way. The 6 o'clock position is here, and that's always going to correspond with the long side of the strap. The short end will go over there. And let's grab the rest of the fasteners here. Okay, so we are going to start with the long side. We're going to slide this strap into place like so. And then on that side, you're going to put one of the longer fasteners. Loosely put that in place, flip it over, and loosely put that one in place. There's enough grip there that they won't fall off on the King. And then just take your driver here and screw that into place. Okay, we're going to repeat for the other side. Okay, and then finally, the 2 side screws here. There we go. And before we show everything off, let's give the front of the case a wipe. So again, we're going to use just a moist towel here. Might as well wipe the case itself. And then dry it off. Good. And then on the case back, go ahead and clean it off as well. And then I like to finish off with just my really fine microfiber cloth here now that I've gotten most of that dirt off. There's some here that are chips that I can't remove off of this glass, but the customer's not asking for that, so don't have to worry about those. And then okay, looks pretty good. And then finally, once that's all clean and off, I like to take just a little bit of painter's tape because it doesn't leave a residue. And then I'll just cover the front here and trace it with my fingers just to get any remaining dust, and then peel it off to keep it clean. And when I ship this back to the customer, I'm actually going to take a brand new piece of tape. I just write a little thank you there on the tape itself, and then I transfer the tape onto the glass, so that way the glass is not making contact with the inside of the case during shipping. The tape is there to protect, and it's very simple for the customer to remove without any residual residue. Okay, so I think that's good. Let's take a look at our final work here. There we go. And the rest of the watch. And definitely cleaner on the front besides the mods itself. Got the customer's glass much cleaner than it was before, as well as the strap, so that way it's gives it a little bit newer life when they put it on. All right, and we are done with our mod for today. So your Casio King with a lime green filter in this case. So guys, that'll do it for today's mod. Thank you very much for tuning in, and if you watched all the way through, I really appreciate it. If you could subscribe to this channel and give any feedback or questions, feel free to put it in the comments. Again, the materials, as much as I can find them, I'm going to put them in the description below. I also have an Instagram, which is in the description, which shows off not only my customer mods, but my own personal watch collection and other everyday carry items that I also carry. So if you could follow me on there as well, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you again to Yao for sending this in and entrusting me with his watch. You know, these people are basically watching me on YouTube or messaging me on Instagram and then trusting me with their, watches. And so I appreciate you guys showing me the trust when you send these. It's greatly appreciated. So I'll get this in the mail for him tomorrow. And thank you guys so much. Have fun, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.